Afternoon, B2. How are things going?
Afternoon, very well for a Monday. We're a little bit late with this one, but it's good to see you, and we'll catch up on the weekend.
Yeah, and it's we've both got big and exciting weeks ahead of us, and short weeks from a work perspective.
Yeah, that's both good and bad. Struggling a bit to get the work side of things done, and then at the same time trying to get packed and sorted for my trail adventure. So thinking about things like snake bite kits and the like.
Yeah, one's a little bit simpler, I think, but same. It's that normal. I'm flying on Wednesday morning to New Zealand, to Queenstown, so it's that normal rush of trying to get mainly work things fixed up before you go.
Yeah, well, absolutely right on the work front. I suddenly realized I don't have any gels, and I quickly put in an order to Chemist Warehouse for click and collect. So I'll have to pick those up today or tomorrow.
Okay, well, that's actually a good little entree into what we're going to talk about today, anyway, Kev. I think we said last week we would talk about the joy of racing. So you and I obviously both have our races coming up um, this weekend, or actually yours starts, I think, on Thursday, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I thought what we could do, I've read a book some time back. It's this book. It's called Running in the Midpack. And it's actually a great book from sort of in the context of everything about running, but it has also got a nice chapter on racing and why people race. So I thought we could maybe just use that as a bit of a framework to talk about our respective races coming up. So I might just
Sounds
open
good.
up with a little paragraph here, which I felt really sort of encapsulates it for me. And certainly in terms of how I felt in the past when sort of undertaking a big race. And it sort of says, we already know racing gives us focus, especially when it follows a hefty dose of focused training. Race day is there for us to come together with everyone like us in a beautiful, exhausting display of the thing we love to do. Race day is for our stories, for our why, is our big display of effort, the time to show off our best gear, our fancy dress, and our personal challenges. So, yeah, races, there can be a lot to races. We'll talk a bit about it now, but it is the sort of culmination of a lot of things and a celebration in many ways, I think.
Yeah, and that's probably why it creates a bit of stress and anxiety. Is there's a lot that's sort of going on there. If take that sort of excerpt and think about it more deeply, it's not just the run. There's a bit more to it, and it's all that preparation that we spoke about last time as well.
Yeah, for sure. But why don't we just kick it off by sharing a little bit about you've got this multi-day trail race coming up. Kev, did you just want to share a little bit around, what that actually involves?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Okay. I'm not able to share here, Hill. So I might need to rely on you maybe to talk to yours first, and then we'll maybe bring mine up. It looks like you've disabled my screen sharing.
Okay. All right. Um,
Maybe you didn't want to see my beautiful pictures because you might be jealous, unless
all
you
good.
could give me access to sharing. But
Yeah, should be, but this Zoom's a bit, just give me 2 secs here, Kev.
well, while you're doing that, what I might do is I might just share just a little paragraph that actually came in the race pack or the event brochure, and I really liked this and got me quite excited. So I'll read you the paragraph. So if you've signed up for this event, then I bet you like an adventure. You like seeing new lands, meeting new people, and falling asleep at the end of the day, exhausted and satiated. Well, all those points are guaranteed because we will stray off the marked route and we will traverse a wild, rugged, and incredibly beautiful part of Australia. We'll make new friends from across the country and form lifelong connections with one another through the adversities and rewards to come. And have no doubt we will definitely fall asleep at the end of each day, having drained our legs but quenched our souls because of it all. That is what life is all about. So I thought that was pretty well written.
Yeah, no, that is pretty cool, and it sounds like a very cool experience you're about to undertake.
Looks like you've given me access now, so I'll see if I can you see that okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's just a bit of a sense of the website, and they've done a really good job, I must admit, of enticing one into some scenery. In fact, that leg there that's Monkey Rock, and I'll actually be running up that rock. I think this is Green Pool from memory in Denmark. I don't know where that is, but along the way. So this is all on the Bibbulmun track, and slightly there's the wind farm in Albany. But you can tell the terrain is just spectacular in terms of the cliffs and the vistas of the ocean and viewpoints, etc. So yeah, it's certainly enticing.
Yeah, wow, that looks amazing. I'm not sure. I thought I might be able to top that with Queenstown, but I'm not sure if I can. Anyway.
Yeah, so as I mentioned last time, 200 Ks over 3 days, teams of 4. So anticipating running in the order of about 15 to 20 Ks each per day, which, at the end of the day is not that bad. But I think judging by the terrain and the schedule, they mark down some of the legs as hard, medium, or easy, and so it just depends on which legs you're running. But yeah, certainly it's going to be a challenge, and I'm sure it'll be made worthwhile by the spectacular scenery for sure.
Yeah, no, it looks amazing.
I'll jump out of that and back to you.
Okay. I might just quickly share something similar from my side, just to give everyone a sense. I mean, this marathon is actually labeled, I think a few marathons claim this label, but as the most beautiful marathon in the world. And it certainly does look spectacular. As we know, Queenstown's a pretty spectacular place, but have a look at that for a track to run on. Actually, 70% of this marathon is on that sort of hard packed trail, and 30% is on the sort of bitumen. So it is also a bit of a different marathon, but yeah, that's sort of some of the scenery there that we're going to be running in. So pretty spectacular.
Beautiful. I actually quite like that hard packed stuff. That's good, and that's just reminiscent of some of the Melbourne tracks that you run on anyway.
Yeah, spot on. Anyway, Kevin, why don't we just talk a little bit about racing? And so I think the first thing we'd like to take everything back to, as we spoke about from the start when we talked about our Comrades goal, is, why are you doing this? And so there are a few things. I'll just mention a few, and you might not like to pick up on one or two from the perspective of your race. But thinking about the deep why is important. And sometimes, yeah, there's nice scenery, I'm doing it, but that's often not the deep why. Another one is, and I think this is the case for both of us on this one, racing gives you a passport to new places and with new people. Race days are uncertain, unexpected, and exciting. Almost always gives you something to celebrate. And racing definitely gives you a focus that you don't necessarily have when you're training. So just a few thoughts of, some of the reasons why people enjoy racing. But is there anything particular for you?
Yeah, I mean, those are certainly valid. I think this one was also probably, for me, quite appealing just because it is a part of the world that I haven't seen by foot. I have done a bit of cycling in this area, so I've seen a bit of it. But so the scenery was one aspect here, but also the trail running side of it does appeal to me, and I feel like it's kind of what I need to get my mind into is a race that's a little bit different, which pace is less important, and trail running is such, and that's quite a good preparation point, I think, for Comrades, because I think where you and I need to do a lot of our work is the slower, longer running, and dialing our pace back. So I'm intending attacking this course, if that's the right word, in a slow and steady sort of fashion, and trying to pick up on the mindset of an ultra runner, an ultra trail runner, if you like. So and also running with one or two people who are of that mindset. And interestingly, one of the guys sort of just is very prepared to pick up whatever distance. And so distance doesn't really come into the equation for some of these runners. They tend to think more about the elevation, and probably once they've looked at the elevation, it's not too bad. There's just really nothing to worry about. So, you know, it's interesting. So, but those are some of the reasons. But for me, it's always also just about the experience of something different. And this one's certainly going to be different to anything I've done before.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it's going to be amazing. You'll have to capture some decent footage, I think.
Yeah.
For me, it's sort of a couple of things. I think you'll recall that this race, you know, we've tried pre-COVID times to run it. You were initially going to be there as well, and so it's really third time lucky. So I felt like I needed to do it, and it's just, you know, a beautiful place to run. It's also for me now in the context of Comrades, it just becomes a bit of a marker in terms of where my fitness is at. And marathons are never easy wherever you're at. So, you know, I suspect it'll tell me how much further I still have to go in my training. But I think from that perspective, it'll be helpful as well. But I'm just going to go out and enjoy it.
Yeah, and it's nice to have a little bit of that pressure off from a time perspective, because we obviously intend running a qualifying marathon closer to the time. But, you know, it'll be nice to bank one and get through it. And then, you know, next time you're doing one, then, you know, you could try and run it a bit harder once you're fitter and in your sort of training block. So I reckon it's great timing for this one. It's going to be, yeah, it'll be tough, but all marathons are tough, but
yeah,
it'd be an exciting sort of experiment to do it a little bit undercooked and just dial things back to see if you can actually just tap into that slower running.
Yeah. Yeah. So why don't we just touch on, we do this quickly because I think both you and I hopefully, you know, I've done enough marathons to understand the logistics of a marathon, but they are important because if you mess up on those, they can be very unsettling. For instance, you forget your gels, you know, that can really destroy your race. So, I mean, logistics are important, and particularly in a big race, particularly in a multi-day race like yours, I'm sure there's all sorts of things that you have to think about. But, you know, some of the things that I noted here, which are just very, very obvious, but very important: be on time. What was the other thing? Just having the right stuff on hand. So we talked about gels, but also even the right stuff in your bag when you're finished, just those sorts of things. It's almost worth having a bit of a checklist that you work through when you prepare for a race, isn't it?
Yeah, and some of these events do it really well because they do sort of almost provide a lot of that for you. And I think it's a case of actually reading the stuff. I know this one's got an excellent brochure attached with everything you need to have, and they actually check your equipment. So you've, for example, got to have a thermal vest. You've got to have a rain jacket with a hood, with a certain rainproofing protection. You've got to have the medical aid kit. You've got to have at least a litre of water per stage. So this one, from a safety perspective, they're absolutely taking a lot of care about. But, you know, I think generally speaking, they would do that with most of these bigger races, no doubt for Queenstown as well. They're giving you a few tips there around what you should bring and the like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yours sounds pretty full on. I saw their GPS trackers and all sorts of things.
Yeah, well, and the other thing is they've got mapping stuff as well that you've got to download maps onto your phone, and it's actually that it's not a race where you can expect to find a marker every you know, a few Ks. In fact, there are none. So a lot of it does run on this Bibbulmun track, which is marked, but there are deviations because they're trying to make it as interesting as possible as well. So you've actually got to navigate a bit as well. So yeah, that aspect is a little bit unknown to me, and I've not done much of that. So yeah, so this is certainly one you've got to be prepared for. And I know you and I have done marathons together where we I think are relatively well prepared. But I remember one funny moment when we were preparing for our first marathon, and you had laid out all your gear on the table, and I went and got all my gear, and I think we'd arranged the same shirts, so we were running in the same shirts. And then you laid out, all your kit, and you had this pair of socks, and I came down with my pair of socks, which were quite specialized, and you had just like a basic pair of Bonds or something. And I remember saying to you, "You're not running in those socks, are you?" And you're like, "Oh, what? What do you mean?" But anyway, I mean, it is interesting because all those things are very personal to you, and it's generally what you tried and tested in. So I'm sure your socks work just fine, but it's quite good to get under people's skin about these things and give them a hard time. I think the next thing you said is you do have salt tablets, don't you? I know, what are those?
But I mean, it's actually an interesting thing you raised, though, because I think the one golden rule about running a big race is don't try anything new that you haven't tried in training. So the wrong thing for me that day would have been to pull out a new pair of socks that I'd never run in, which is why I was pretty comfortable, Kev. I'd done all my training in those socks, even though they were pretty basic socks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But and it's funny, one of the things I always talk about is when you get to a race and you're getting ready, it's amazing how much more pedantic one is about I don't know, even tying your shoelaces. And the mistake I actually make a lot is because it's a race, I go, right, okay, I really need to tighten up these shoelaces. And of course, that's the worst thing you can do as well, because, if you've got a shoelace coming over the top of your foot and it's too tight, you're going to run into all sorts of problems. So small things like that. And, the other one is cutting your toenails, for example, just before a race, never a good idea either. So it leaves sort of sharp edges and you can run into some significant problems. So those things just come with a bit of experience, no doubt. And but some things will be unforeseen. And but yeah, whatever you can take out of that unforeseen category, you want to do, because it's just going to make your day a lot easier.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, why don't we talk a little bit around race strategy, because I think this is important. I think, even though for both of us we haven't got any particular time goals or anything like that, nevertheless, you've done all the training. You want to go in with a bit of a plan for the day, just to sort of turn up there and not even have a think about what you're going to try and do on the day. I think would be a lost opportunity in some ways. So there are a few things here that I just wanted to talk about, and we can do it quite quickly, Kev. The first and obvious one is race pace. I think you've already talked about that in your context of your trail run, going slower. You obviously have to very much be guided by the elevation and the conditions, etc. So I know with trail runs, sort of sticking or setting a pace in your mind is quite difficult. Marathon's a bit different. I have had a think about this. In fact, I've actually got some guidance from the coach on this one based on, sort of where I'm at. And so I've sort of landed on roughly a 4-hour marathon, which is somewhere between 5:30 and 5:40 pace, which is, certainly slower than I've ever done a marathon, but I'm also undertrained compared to where I've ever been. So that's how I'm going to go out and approach it. I'm going to try and keep it pretty even in terms of effort, and then see how far I can go at that pace. And then, you can always readjust if things aren't going well or going better than planned. But with these large marathons, as we know, they often have paces, and that's quite an easy way to try without too much effort and lock into a pace. So I think I might actually even just try and lock into the 4-hour pacer.
Yeah, that's a great idea, I reckon, because that helps you sort of discipline yourself, because you might be feeling quite fresh in the first, 15 to 20 Ks. And the temptation then is to, run at your normal pace. And I know your sort of cruising pace is probably going to be, 5-minute Ks. And so 5:30 is going to initially feel quite slow for you. But I mean, my sense of that, and I have done one marathon that way where I was running with a friend, and we ran the first half at 5:30s. And then I sort of left him at about the halfway mark, and I dialed things up a bit. And it was a great run that day, because I got a negative split, and yeah, I still finished pretty shattered. But a marathon you'll always finish pretty shattered. But it was great to just manage that that pace better and your effort. So I think it'll be a great strategy. 4 hours does feel about right. And as you say, if you really did have a bit more in the tank at the end, you'll no doubt push yourself. But you don't have to.
Yeah. Yeah. These ones, the next two are probably more important for you than they are for me, but with any long race, I think they're important nevertheless, and those are nutrition and hydration. So I don't know what thinking you've done for your race, Kev.
Yeah, I'm pretty basic on that front, and I think I've got a lot of learning to do in that space still. I'm just relying on what I've always done, so I'm not changing anything up for this one. So for me, it's a combination when I'm running trails of gels and trail bars. So I use the Cliff bars, and then I use the Endura gels. The only thing with both those things is they tend to be quite sweet. And so I know that they've also got some aid stations where they'll have, a few other options. Potatoes are very good, as you know. So I might take in a few little potatoes on the way as well. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is just to go with what you're used to, and I seem to tolerate those gels okay. And the trail bars, likewise, but they are very sweet, so you just got to get used to that. Yeah. And I tend to just utilize water as opposed to sports drinks because I'm sort of getting enough of the energy out of the bars and the gels. So I'll probably just go with water. So nothing too fancy, but it is an area that I want to start experimenting a bit more with, so that for Comrades we've got some maybe slightly more natural foods as well, than just taking in too many gels.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the upside, I'm very similar to you. I'll go gels and water. The upside with the gels is they're obviously pretty easy to carry and consume.
Yeah.
And I have done a bit of training with them. So yeah, you just need to get used to them. But once you're used to them, they work pretty well.
What's your favorite flavor that you go with there?
I get sick of the flavor, so I now go with an assortment. I pretty much, I think for Queenstown, I have 8 gels with 4 different flavors. So, yeah.
All right. Yeah, and I mean the thing there as well is also not to, not to kind of make that mistake with the gels of not, doing what they suggest on the packet, because and getting some advice about it, because I think the danger with gels is you sort of get to the space where you think you don't need one, and you leave it, so you don't take it as directed, and then all of a sudden you start feeling like your energy's dropped right off, and you go, oh well, I'll quickly take a gel, that'll sort me out.
Yeah,
and there's no impact, and it takes time to kick in. And so yeah, I think just being proactive with those gels is quite important as well, and making sure you take them as directed.
Yeah, and a rough rule of thumb for me is you need about 1 gram of carbs per kilogram of body weight per hour of running. So I've worked out, I think the Enduro gels are about 35 grams of carbs. Yeah. So just very roughly, that's 1 gel every half an hour. So an hour gives me 70 grams of carbs. I'm a bit more than 70 kgs. But so just knowing those rough rules of thumb is helpful. So as you say, you can be disciplined with how you take them.
Yeah, no, that's good. And then you don't want to carry too much stuff. I mean, fortunately for me, well, not fortunately, I don't really like carrying stuff, but I'm going to be having to carry a bit of equipment and and stuff that we have to carry. So I'm going to have a race vest on with a bit of gear. I don't typically like that. I think you're the same. We prefer to run sort of without that sort of stuff, but you're a bit of a flip belt user, aren't you? So you'll have them stashed into your flip belt.
Yeah, no, the flip belts, very comfortable and can store probably up to about 8 gels in there. So yeah, works well for a marathon, not for a trail run though.
What you got to watch, Hill, is when you pulling them out, that you don't pull out 4 onto and drop them onto the road, and you don't want that sort of mishap. So make sure you're pulling out one at a time there.
We know there's been some classic stories of people with gels that are malfunctioning. They they're also very sticky things, gel. So you don't want to get them opening up in your clothing or anything like that.
Yeah, well, no mentions of some of your friends, but I do know you have a friend who stuck one in his shoe and it burst in his shoe, and that caused a bit of grief. So.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing just on race strategy is just, being proactive and thinking through, any issues or scenarios that can happen on the day. You don't want to get negative. I mean, it's good to be in a positive mindset, but just to actually recognize that, there are things that could happen that you can't control, whether it be the weather, whether it be some injury that comes on you, etc. So it's just almost going in with the right mindset around those things. And then, all you can really control is how you react to those things. So, rather than when one of those things happens, it becomes a catastrophe, you've actually thought it through pre the race and you react in the best possible way you can.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think obviously looking at the weather conditions and those sorts of things play a big part, because that does help with your frame of mind. If you know you're going to be running into a breeze or there's going to be rain, there's not much you can do about it, but it does then get you a bit more prepared around what you might wear, or you can actually work out how hard to go in the first half where you might be into the breeze and conserve your efforts and the like. So I think that's right, but then there's sort of untold things that can happen that you're just not going to have foreseen necessarily. But yeah, I think it's worth thinking those things through. And in my case, unfortunately, this snake issue is one that I've got to think through, and I've got to watch a little video on how to do a snake bandage and that sort of stuff. Yeah, it's a bit of a phobia, so I must admit I'm not too keen to see too many snakes. And there was one of the ladies who ran the Bibbulmun was telling me, you get so used to seeing them that it just becomes, there's another snake. It's like, that you don't need to be telling me that sort of stuff. But
hopefully it's not warm enough for them to be out in force yet. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, the weather is going to be a little bit cooler. That's over the 3 days. So I don't know what that means. Hopefully they keep their distance. That's all I'm asking. And it doesn't help as well that the sign for the Bibbulmun track is the emblem is a snake. But really, I don't know who chose that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, and a few other things. We won't go into these in detail, but so knowing your start spot in the race, not so much in probably what you're doing, but in these big marathons. Getting into your right sort of starting spot and even figuring out where you are in that starting spot. There's nothing more frustrating than to get caught up in, unnecessary traffic when you're trying to sort of get into your rhythm. So things like that, knowing the route as best you can, just knowing what to expect. I remember when I ran my first marathon in New York, I had no idea that at the 25K mark, I was going to run up a serious incline to cross onto Manhattan. It was a long bridge of about 1.6 Ks, and I wasn't expected for that, and it really did have a major impact on my race. So just small things, know the route, even if you can't travel the route before, just looking at the elevations, etc. These all sound like obvious things, but I think often people don't do or take the time to do. Yeah.
Yeah, Hill, particularly, for Queenstown and any of those bigger marathons, Queenstown might not be that large, but there'll be all sorts of sort of instructions around the starting area and how you access that starting area. And, I must admit, for Berlin, I didn't pay enough attention to that and couldn't get into my starting grid. And it was all like basically cordoned off, if you like, and I tried to enter from the side and I couldn't actually get in, and it was just chockers. Literally I could climb over that sort of railing, but there were other people standing there, so I could be sort of almost climbing onto other people, and it became a real problem. And then transpired I wasn't actually in my right batch, so that's sort of just poor planning and and paying attention to that in particular, and understanding where to enter from, and if you're obviously driving there, where to park and to allow enough time and all those sorts of things. Yeah, I think one underestimates them because you're so focused on your fitness and whether you've got all your gear, that sometimes those logistics can trip you up badly.
Yeah, spot on. And those things all burn energy. If they start going wrong and start stressing you out, then you're burning a whole lot of energy, prior to the race that you shouldn't be. So yeah, those small things all add up to make a massive difference for sure.
Yeah, and getting it right as to, if you are likely before a marathon to eat something, and most people will, is just trying to work that through as well. When you have something, that you're going to digest it in time, that you're not having too much, and all your toileting sort of routines, that can also be tricky. So it's there's a lot to think about on the day, and the more planned you are with the stuff that you can be planned about, you take a bit of that stress away for sure.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I think most runners are quite process-driven people, and so I know, and I'm like this, a lot of runners actually enjoy the logistical aspect and the planning aspect that comes with running a race. So if you're one of those people, it's actually part of the experience, and I am, and I enjoy it. There are others that don't so much, and they are often the ones that get caught short on the preparation. But I think a lot of runners enjoy the process, and so therefore they do a pretty good job at it.
Well, Hill, I think if you're one of those people who don't like to prepare and just like to rock up and run, come run Perth, because I was flabbergasted when I did the run the other day. People were literally arriving 5 minutes before the run. They're like calling, last people to get in, into position type thing, and the people just fluffing around inside. I couldn't believe it. It was very amusing to watch. I would have been so stressed out. I could have been ready in my starting chutes and sort of taken all in. People were, it's very amusing to watch at marathons how people operate.
Yeah, and I think, the other thing about races, depending on what you're trying to achieve, but because it's a big moment often and you put a lot of hard work, I think, you actually do need to concentrate in a marathon, particularly in those start stages where you're navigating a lot of traffic. I've seen a lot of people's races come to an end right at the start because they trip or, they're not focused on what they're doing. So you actually do need to get in the zone and concentrate on. It sounds obvious, but you really do.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I've literally seen people running into poles, into bollards, jumping onto pavements to try and weave past people and not realizing there's an obstacle and they can't see because there's so many people.
Yeah.
You've got to be really sensible, and you've got to sort of bide your time to pass people and do it sort of safely. It sounds crazy, but one little trip and your race could be over. So yeah, I agree. You've got to take a fairly conservative approach, and don't try and race from the get-go. Unless you're one of the elite athletes, there's not a lot to be gained from that, I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah. Okay, well, why don't we finish up with, I think, part of racing that I think is often overlooked, because a lot of the training obviously goes into your physical conditioning, and that, I think people focus on that. That's obviously sort of what's required. But what I wanted to talk about is actually sort of mastering your mindset and the sort of psychological aspect on it. Because, what I would argue is that you don't just turn up on the day and go, mindset wise, there's training required to mastering your mindset as well. And you actually need to do it a long time before the day of the race. And it's really just getting yourself revisiting all of those reasons why you're doing it, thinking about it in a positive, it's that sort of that positive psychology to anything that you want to do well at. It's, we talked about this, I think, in one of the prior discussions around having a mantra when things get tough, that can help you get through those tough points. It's really building your confidence. And it's also recognizing, I think, that, you are going to, especially in a marathon or something like you doing, there is going to be a part where it's going to hurt, and it's supposed to hurt. Otherwise, it's not worth doing. And so it's just working through those things in your mind a long time before you get into the race. So, you know, the 35K mark on the marathon, you should expect it to hurt. And that should almost be something that you welcome as something that, you know, what you've trained for. So I think this one often gets overlooked, and it's those people who can really push through the mindset part of it that really end up having fantastic races. So I don't know what your experience has been with that, Kev, but I mean, for us, neither of these two races that we're doing is our major goal. But even having said that, I think just thinking through that and thinking about what you're actually trying to achieve on those days is worthwhile doing.
Yeah, I mean, as I said in the beginning, for me, this one's going to be an interesting experiment. If I can sort of report back and say, you know, I ran a slow and steady sort of race, and you know, and managed my energy over the 3 days, so that I pulled up. You know, sure, I'm going to be tired and sore, but I want to be able to manage myself over the 3 days. I've once done a stage race, a mountain biking stage race, and absolutely, you know, blew up in day one because I went so hard. Didn't manage my effort. Really didn't feel like getting out of bed on day two. I managed to get through the 3 days, but it was completely brutal. And the last day was by no means enjoyable. All I dreamt about was getting onto the bitumen and off the trails. Yeah. And so you don't want to be doing it like that. So for me, this is managing my energy over the 3 days, and then being able to come back and say, look, you know, no one's really interested in the time anyway. I mean, it's not about time. It's about actually, you know, enjoying it, getting through it, being able to get through the harder parts of it. So yeah, it's a slightly different beast, but yeah, going in with the mentality of that and conserving energy is going to be a good one and a good lesson for comrades, no doubt.
Yeah, I think for me, the mindset is that this is really just an early part of the journey. And so, you know, that's certainly going to be my mindset, and just thinking about why this is important in the context of the bigger picture, I think will definitely help get through those painful stages. And, you know,
I think that, you know, and I know this for other runners as well, if you are slightly competitive with your running and you're used to running for PBs and you sort of get a lot of energy from racing PBs and trying to go fast, it's actually quite hard to do the opposite. So, you know, I've no doubt there'll be times where I just go, well, no, I can go faster here, or but you know, I think that's, as you say, it goes back to the why you're doing it. So if you've explored your why, and you're clear on that, then there should be no need to try and, you know, race to the extent that you're hurting yourself.
Yeah. Okay, Kev. I think we've got race preparation to go off and do, so we can leave it there. But yeah, hopefully you have a fantastic experience over the next few days, and we'll report back next week.
Absolutely. You too. Good luck for the travel over there. At least it's a relatively short flight, and your prep. And I know you're going with a mate as well. I hope he goes well. And I'm sure it'll be, wow, that scenery is spectacular. So I'm sorry to be missing out on that. But I think I've got a flight there for next year. So maybe next year. And yeah, all the best. I'm sure you'll go well. Just yeah, let it ring in your head that you got to dial the pace back, particularly in the beginning. You know, don't get tempted into going too fast. Yeah, it'll require a bit of discipline, but I'll be focused on it. But anyway, why don't I leave us with a quote, which is actually out of the running book that I shared earlier, and it is about racing. And it says, "It strips you back, lays you bare, and gives you glory, or takes your heart out." So, but yeah, there's always a raw experience to be experienced, normally for the positive, I would say, when it comes to racing. But yeah, let's go out and enjoy it this week. Yeah? Well, the thing is, as well, on that front is, I think it does, you know, it certainly takes its toll during the race, but when you finish, there's no better feeling, and the celebration afterwards and talking about the journey is so much fun. So yeah, let's prepare for both. It's going to be hard, but it's also going to be a lot of fun, and there'll be a lot to talk about. So yeah, that's kind of life, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. See you, Kev.
Okay, thanks, Hill. All the best.
Bye.
Enjoy. Bye.